Thank you very much. I will stand on previous topic. My job here is to review this book that we are here gathered to present. In Igbo law, there is a story about an Oniji who was caught in an approaching rain that compelled him to walk into the Obi in the nearest homestead on his way from the rain. But as he made himself comfortable in the cozy warmth from the well-decorated smoldering log fire and fell into that amiable chit-chat that often characterizes two Igbo adults that found themselves in such an encounter with his host. His inability to fathom exactly where the rain that he was taking refuge from began to hit him became cause for the leather to ask him to take his leave. The rationale being that the one who is unable to dissect where the rain began to drench him will, by extension, be incapable of knowing where he dried it off his body. In all of its essence, the foregoing premise is meant to remind us that it is also necessary to point out the seminal source of what the authors and the editors of the Nigeria General 1962 and Biafra Myths and Realities, which is also the book we are all here gathered to participate in its presentation. What they rightly characterize as the greatest historical burden that continues to distort the identity and character of Ndi and render them easily vulnerable to conspiracy and prominence to violent physical attacks and genocide, especially by their Fulani neighbors in the Nigerian Federation. One must quickly make a point of correction in the aforementioned post. The Fulani, a nomadic cattle rearing people whose original home is in the Fudajela mountain, some of whom settled among the Hausa and other indigenous inhabitants of the far north Upper Niger Basin, are in no way neighbors to the east. Our homeland is, in contrast, located far away from the arid savanna in a known portion of the lower southeast Niger Basin. The respective ecology of Hausaland and the other parts of the Upper Niger that the Fulani wandered into and settled amongst its indigenous inhabitants, and the lower Niger, lower southeast Niger Basin are stark contrasts. The former is serene, arid, and savanna grassland that tapers right into the Sahel, while the latter is thick evergreen rainforest zone. This reviewer takes pain to make this observation because, as we point out elsewhere, on both geography and by extension ecology influence the respective history and culture, as well as the racial makeup of the distinct peoples that made their homeland and inhabit parts of the Niger Basin that the British carved into the Nigerian supernatural state. The January 1962 coup is misrepresented and is made to become that historical burden for the Igbo by the Fulani and the others. This is to the degree that it is used to instigate a chain of episodic violent events and adversities masterminded by the Fulani and used to inflict injuries, hurts, and all sorts of marginalization on the Igbo. A litany will add credence here. The unprovoked systematic massacre of Igbo residents of urban centers and parts of the north and the west of Nigeria, sequel to the July 28 to 30, 1960 military revolt by officers and rank-and-file soldiers from nationalities that inhabit the upper Niger, in which Igbo officers and rank-and-file soldiers were systematically targeted and slaughtered in numbers. Those massacres canalized into pogroms and the genocidal war that Nigeria subsequently levied on the Republic of Biafra, which the Igbo resolved to declare to self-protect after they were driven to their homeland. The various punitive policies that the Fulani rulers of Nigeria have used to specifically target the Igbo since the end of the Nigeria-Biafra War in 1970. The various religious uprisings and riots that wantonly targeted and slaughtered Igbo residents of cities in the north of Nigeria, and now the ongoing Boko Haram and rampaging Fulani herdsmen. Even though the authors and editors of the book under review here hit the nail on its head in the assertion about the coup d'etat being made into a burden on the Igbo by the Fulani, it is not indeed where the rain started to drench the Igbo in the Nigeria project. It was way back at the onset of British colonial intervention. The British at first found it difficult to understand the resoundingly democratic Igbo political system and its accompanying social structures and their direct demographic features. It was not that they lacked the capacity to understand. What they made in the Igbo is not exactly what they were looking for and needed to establish and run a colonial project. I have seen an intelligent report on the arm that can best be characterized as wishful fantasy. The notion expressed in that report being that the success with which the Aro Igbo propagated long-distance trade throughout the lower southeast was indicative of their stability for corruption in the colonial project, as clear as was the case in the upper Niger with the Fulani. Their first scene was even evoked as evidence that they were of Fulani stock. That fantasy quickly frozen when the British realized that, like the rest of their fellow Igbo, the armed Igbo are not culturally wired to be corrupted into patronage-like relationship that would aid and abet the colonial rule. Our own late Professor Kenneth T.K. once observed that rather than trying to understand those, the British in their haughty nature, they situated the Igbo and their world as amounting, both begin, to a patchwork of confusion and anarchy, totally lacking of authority and control, both ends. It was lost on them that what they wrongly misunderstood as a patchwork, a confusion, lack of authority and control are the outcomes of centuries of interaction of a people with the geography and ecology of their homeland that evolved into a village-based democratic system of government. Given who they are, I mean the British, they are colonizers who were out to carve out a colonial project. Their manifest desire was to impose absolute control where it does not even exist normatively, by the use of violence and disruption in order to achieve the imposition of military political authority and control over the constituent peoples in their colonial project, Nigeria. In the case of the Igbo, the British refused to appreciate that it would be impossible to achieve that desire over a people who had evolved a fiercely democratic village-based system of practicing authority. But punitive military expeditions that worked successfully elsewhere failed woefully amongst the Igbo. In Yoruba land, for instance, sequel to the Anglo-Ijebu War of 1892 against the Ijebu Yoruba, there were only the armed resistance by the Lauren Yoruba in 1897, which lasted for a month, January to February, the extensive demonstrations and riots by the Igbo Yoruba in August 1914, sequel to the amalgamation, the October-November 1916 bloody armed revolt by the Oyo Yoruba and the extensive armed revolt by the Iwa Yoruba in 1918 that were primarily provoked by the amalgamation of 1914. Thereafter, Yoruba land in its entirety was completely pacified. In the Upper Niger, between 1897 and 1948, there were a total of 27 armed revolts against the British. In fact, the armed revolts, 18 of them that were recorded in the areas in the period 1906 to 1948 were mounted against the British and their foreign clients by the distinct peoples who wouldn't submit to caliphate conquest. In essence, right after Lugard's army routed the last of the Caliphate army and killed the Sultan Akahiru on the plains of Sokoto in 1904, the Fulani saw their British conquerors as instruments of destiny and submitted to them. Contrast cases above with the more than 51 acts of armed resistance, revolts, guerrilla insurrection, rebellion that the Igbo mounted against their British invaders in the period 1901 and then 1929. In the period 1901 to 1902, sequel to the Arrow expedition, there were more than 20 of them, of those revolts in Igbo land. From that time up until 1932, there was a standing policy put in place who was a target in the action, who alongside other Igbo officers that included the Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu become instrumental to foiling it, still have been the author of the same coup. No Igbo politician or activist has ever anything to do with it. Furthermore, the book contains indisputable facts that form two extensions of fallacies on the general analysis above. The Republic of Biafra and its leaders were not the aggressors in the Nigeria Biafra war, and that the inclusion of Biafra troops into the Midwest, commanded by Victor Banjo, was not an ambition by the Igbo to seize territories in Nigeria. Ndi Igbo are not culturally disposed to overrun and colonize any other people. The inclusion into the Midwest by Biafra troops under Banjo, Banjo's command was in response to Awolowo's request for help through Banjo to liberate Yoruba from occupation by soldiers from the north who had refused to return to their region of origin. It was the offer of the vice chairmanship of the Federal Executive Council to Awolowo by Gowon that swayed him to instruct Banjo to halt the liberation trade, which had gotten as far as Ore. Ojukwu's letter to Banjo, in which he specified the conditions for lending Biafra troops, and Banjo's response letter accepting those conditions speak for themselves. Neither Ojukwu nor the Republic of Biafra was the aggressor in the war. Gowon and his regime were. After he reneged on the Aburi Accord upon returning to Lagos, the levied war on Biafra, which was in fact ill-prepared for it at the time. This book should be in the hands of everyone Igbo at home and in the diaspora. It should also be in the hands of every Igbo friend and well-wisher. Sociologists coin the concept of race making and use it to describe efforts that utilize intellectual rigor and related efforts by a targeted people or community to equip and prepare members and their leaders to get up and stand up to resist threats to their existence. That concept is the role that the ADF assigned itself in the service of India. In this reviewer, we are a big counter. You will say to the ADF and its leaders, Ozoba, Ndi ADF, Ozoba, they will. Thank you very much.
Darling, it's too easy to have a lawyer. Okay, for our William, I go on you. Nigga, no. Nigga, number of them, no. Come on, and maybe I'll come away from the This one, our movie, one thing. When I never see the Over a candy gas. What did you have? What candy gas? Although, good way, oh, candy gas. Each of me where I got it's Akabia. My brother, Madonna. Akabia. Ozopa. Because Takaka, no, civilized people. I got a go to one. Keep it. Now you natural one. Number 1 million miles and one Obogana, Boga, oh, yeah, we are supposed to be sent over. I make people and you I am. You might have already no get by a movement. No, myself, no, if I know you may have go for ya. I could better my one and more. I don't know that all super. Magana pneumonia or the program. Oh, yeah, the open even for the zoo. Oh, then I had to go even quadrant. Macana. Oyanya was there not in the West Daniel Abu. Edena Pua is a boy. Even now, you on your own, Mona, on your own, you copy now. No, Pekka. Did you read your woman? Can you do it? Any book is a book lost. Here, and not of war. And it got a never boy, I won't because it's not at the party over there. Divine, I don't know. And my own in America, Hanyaka. Also, very well, Apua. We know that Yaga. Yes, Una Sam, Amuja, Oba, Max, William and put on and ever, is that is actually I can not of that. Thank you. Very time. Yeah, because you don't need to next where's the cigarette? Where's Bob? Where's the cigarette? Jack in a jacket appointment. I never go by the morning. I follow my Agatia or Zopa. I don't know. I will take. I will take. You grab one. You take it. Rather.
Maria and